Hey everybody, welcome to Crackpot, the podcast where each and every week we dive into a different conspiracy theory and we discuss the merits or the demerits of each. We're your hosts. I'm Tim.
And I'm Zach.
Hello, Zach.
Hello, Tim. How we doing today, my man?
I'm doing fine and dandy. Thank you.
I am doing fine, well, and also good.
And dandy.
And dandy, there you go.
Yeah, no, I'm feeling live. I'm feeling hot.
I like what you did there. I saw that look in your eye when I think you stumbled upon that by accident. You had that look like,
I'm going to roll with it.
Yeah, accidental pun. Oh, yeah, baby.
Pretend that I'm smart and witty. Okay, good. I'm feeling alive.
I should say puns and the ability to make puns is no indication of intelligence. In fact, there may be an inverse relationship there.
I completely disagree. Puns, I think, are the highest form of humor. So, come at me if you disagree. What are we talking about, man? What's happening?
Well, I got to get my head out of that space, the pun space, the pun zone, and start talking a little bit today about something that just absolutely fascinates me for many reasons, on many levels, and it's just super cool stuff.
I'm all in.
All right, so today we're talking about past lives and past life regression therapy.
I know what the first thing is. I don't know what the second thing is.
Yeah, they're related, I guess you could say. And before I go too far in kind of breaking down exactly what we're talking about, of course, past lives, reincarnation, just as a general belief system, right? You've got kind of that happening here.
Yeah.
Also, you have really some like hypnotherapy, science, broader therapy things as it relates to past lives.
Okay.
So this is actually really, really fascinating. And before we talk specifically about the details there and get into some of the science and the stories and stuff, I just want to ask you very, very bluntly at the very beginning, Tim, where do you stand with, well, let's just start with past lives and reincarnation and all that stuff. What's your take on it?
It doesn't really fall into my belief system in a very broad sense. But then again, like, I don't even know what my belief system is at this point. So, but it doesn't, okay, basically in a Judeo-Christian, society that we live in, it's like there is either a heaven or not.
Yeah.
And generally the idea of reincarnation is not talked about that much. So a roundabout way of me very poorly saying that I just don't necessarily believe in it. But that being said, I don't want to step on your toes here, steal your thunder, but like I've heard stories and it's like, that's crazy. I mean, I think we did an episode on this before.
Yes.
And there's a few of those that I still think about to this day. It's like, there's no way they would have or could have or should have known any of that. So it's like, how else do you explain that other than, I don't know.
Yeah.
Reincarnation, I guess.
That's it, right? I mean, that's where it gets like really uncomfortable and it's like, okay, well, what's actually going on?
So, I mean, you raised in a Christian household and et cetera. I don't know. Where do you come down on this?
It's hard, man, because so categorically growing up, it was no such thing as reincarnation.
Sure.
Okay. But I was always curious.
But like billions of people on this planet believe it, so I don't know.
Right. And then that's where, like I've talked about before, my interest just in the paranormal through church, coincidentally or ironically or whatever you want to say to that point, then also kind of goes over into this weird space, which includes past lives and reincarnation, because you hear these stories, and I don't know if it's like, is this a ghost story? Is this just a crazy anecdote? Like, what is this?
Right.
Because you hear these past life stories and you're just like, I cannot explain it any other way.
Yep. I'm right there with you.
So we're going to get into all that stuff in a little bit. And so I will say, strictly speaking, this isn't really a conspiracy theory.
Oh, yeah, but when do we actually do conspiracy
Exactly. I don't care. I just think it's super interesting, and I think everybody else will too. And so guess what, guys? You're along for the ride too, my friends. And that's very cool because some of these stories are just bonkers. And so I got this specifically, or most of these stories here specifically from a book called The Past Life Perspective, Discovering Your True Nature Across Multiple Lifetimes by Ann C. Barham, and she's a licensed marriage and family therapist. Talk more about her credentials here in a little bit. But it's really interesting because this book was written in such a way where the idea is to give the reader stories that are crazy, but then also talk about like how to build and grow and move past trauma.
Oh,
past life experiences.
Okay.
Yep.
So you bring the trauma, you bring the experiences with you.
Yes.
In a way, wow, that sounds like just complete woo-woo pseudoscience. I am still all in. Don't let me dissuade you.
No, exactly, dude. So, one that I'm not going to talk about today, it didn't even come up in the book, but, a pretty basic made-up example of this kind of idea is fear of heights. Right? And so then through past life regression, finding out perhaps a person died by falling from a high place or some sort of accident like that. And so this book is laid out where it's different themes throughout life and different challenges that people experience. And I'll call them out every time I go through these. And the idea is, again, just like using those experiences, using that past life therapy, then to grow and move on past that trauma.
Okay.
So that's cool.
At the end of the day, if it works for the patient, then who cares? But interesting.
It is. And so this is what's pretty cool about this. And I think one of the reasons why I am slightly freaked out by some of this stuff is because, like, the process that they follow is starting with hypnosis. So typically you have a person, like let's just say you, Timothy Jerome, you come to my office and you're saying, hey, look, I've got this issue. I'm afraid of heights, let's just say.
Yep.
And then I say, okay, well, let's crack it open, crack open the hood, peel back the curtain, something like that.
Crack open the hood.
Yeah. Yeah, don't crack the hood.
Whatever.
In any event, so you lay down in a bed or something like that, and then I count back from 10, and pretty soon you're hypnotized. And I tell you what, for that reason, this both intrigues me somewhat more and also keeps me not as intrigued too, because like that can be the excuse, right?
Exactly.
And so what I found particularly interesting was, according to the American Medical Association folks, hypnotherapy has been recognized by 1958. In fact, according to the AMA, hypnosis has a recognized place in the medical armamentarium, I guess is the word, and is a useful technique in the treatment of certain illnesses when employed by qualified medical and dental personnel.
Dental personnel.
Yeah, if you got a bad
that edition.
toothache,
Okay.
exactly.
Well, that's interesting because I think it is a very common knee-jerk reaction. Just be like, oh, hypnosis. That's quackery. It's not real. But the AMA says it's a real thing.
Correct.
In the right hands.
In the right hands.
With the right dentist.
Isn't that? I know. I want to follow up on that point. Right. Maybe that's the conspiracy theory here. The other interesting kind of anecdote here is that the American Psychological Association has recognized this for decades also. And actually, just directly from their website, it says, although hypnosis has been controversial, most clinicians now agree it can be powerful, effective therapeutic technique for a wide range of conditions, including pain, anxiety, and mood disorders. Hypnosis can also help people change their habits, such as quitting smoking.
Sure.
And so this is the part of me that my brain just kind of splits in half, and it goes, okay, I guess some of this is real, and I guess maybe not, because if you're doing a past life regression therapy, you are undergoing hypnosis.
Yeah, most likely, right?
You literally are.
Okay.
And it's
most likely.
Yes, and through that hypnosis, then, you are drawing out these past life experiences.
Okay.
And so while past life regression per se, literally that as a therapy, hasn't been recognized by the AMA or the, I guess it's probably APA, I will say, well, geez, isn't this kind of the back door into saying this probably could have some credibility to it?
Yeah, I suppose inversely, it's these are not the personnel that they're speaking of when they say this is a useful medical tool.
Exactly. So let's do this. So I thought what would make sense here, before I get into some of the stories from the book, I wanted to cut over to a YouTube clip. I'll just pull the audio. Tim, I'll share the video here with you. We can kind of narrate what's going along. But in short, it's just about a minute and a half clip here of a therapist basically going through a past life regression therapy session, in which you'll hear some of the conversation, you'll hear some of the discussion, and the hypnosis part has been done, so I kind of fast forwarded to where she's talking. And don't worry if you can't hear it really great. We'll make sure we kind of restate what they're discussing. But let's cut over to that clip now, okay?
Fine. Yeah.
Large windows.
Yeah.
And you can see the beautiful landscape outside.
Mm-hmm.
There are candles.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in a different house.
Okay.
I'm old.
How old are you, Kamini?
I'm very old. I'm more than 60.
Okay. Are you healthy?
No.
You're unwell?
I'm old.
Okay. Any husband?
Yes.
Who is there?
My son, his wife, and their son.
So you did get married in the life that you are seeing, yeah?
Yeah.
Was it a happy marriage?
No.
Did you get married to the same guy?
No.
Okay. Is he dead and gone?
I don't know about the other guy.
Your husband?
He's there.
He's there? And you have only one son?
No, I have two more.
Two more. They're not there with you?
No, they are away. They don't live here.
Oh, okay. So are you a sad old lady, or are you...
All right, Tim, so I know it might have been a little, I know the audio isn't perfect, but it's probably the best that I could find here on YouTube. And I, just some thoughts in terms of kind of what you heard, maybe what you observed.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting to hear her just kind of talk about her surroundings.
Yeah.
Just odd.
Just drawing out little facts and details.
Exactly.
Yeah. Anything else that you heard?
I
in
mean,
there?
the family talk as well.
Yeah.
Just, I don't know.
People in her life and all that stuff.
It's interesting.
It is. And what I'll say is, when you saw the video, did it look at all like anybody was faking anything or anything was out of place
No,
or
it
bizarre?
didn't look like actors or anything like that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
It's interesting.
Exactly. And so that's why, to me, as I talk about this stuff, I go, to me, this looks like just a regular, good old-fashioned hypnosis, session, more
Kind
or less.
of, yeah.
But what's unique is, of course, then talking about these different past life experiences. So, cool. All right. So let's shift gears now back to the book, kind of setting the stage for what, the listeners heard, kind of what we saw. And I want to talk more about Anne Barham, because this is the author of the book, because she had a pretty powerful experience that also kind of transformed the way that she looked at all this stuff.
Oh, okay.
So very interesting. So she holds a master's degree in counseling psychology from Santa Clara University out in California. Like I said, she's a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California. And she actually became interested in past life regression therapy while completing her master's degree, and coincidentally or whatever, took a course on a related topic to this past life regression therapy. And what was weird was the fact that the professor she was studying with said, hey, look, think about how you can apply this to your life and others, of course, throughout your therapy. And so then they thought it's a natural place to perhaps try myself, is what she thought to herself. So to set the stage a little bit, the writer, Miss Barham, was born with the condition called hammer toe.
Okay.
Hammer toe is, if you think about your pinky toe, it's turned slightly sideways and also kind of tucks under the ring finger toe, whatever's next to it.
The ring toe. That's where I put my toe rings on. Yeah.
So she was born with that. It caused her pain and discomfort throughout life. And then as she was older, she actually had surgery to correct this hammer toe.
Sure.
And then it was better, but she still continued to experience pain and discomfort in her feet.
Okay.
So kind of crazy. So she then had the opportunity to go through a past life regression therapy session with this professor. And I will read what the experience was, and we can just talk about it here shortly.
Sure.
All right. So here we go. I lay down on the carpet in the front of a class of about a dozen people. My professor used a gentle hypnotic induction to put me in a relaxed state, then directed me at the time and place where the problem with my feet originated. I was startled to find myself sensing an adolescent girl with Asian features and identifying with her. Then the story just began to roll out from there. She, or I, was extremely upset because my family had insisted on binding my feet. Not only was it painful, it limited my ability to move about and do things. So I'll interject there quickly. So feet binding, it was a method of wrapping a woman's foot and basically constricting the growth in such a way as to look more favorable or appealing to like a potential suitor. But of course, it's horribly debilitating, and I think it's been discontinued since like 1910 or so. Continue on with the story. Unusual for that culture and time period, I was a rather strong-willed young girl, and I decided to defy authority and tradition. With the help of a household servant, I made a plan to run away, but I was caught in the act. The defiant action was considered a terrible disgrace for my family, and particularly for my father, who had some position of note in the community. He eventually disowned me and sold me into servitude. I saw images of me walking barefoot and in rags over rough and rocky terrain in a place far from home. I knew that I was in eternal shame for dishonoring my father. I worked for some time as a kitchen servant, and eventually I used one of the kitchen knives to take my own life because I could no longer bear the disgrace of my position. Now, her professor moved her back through the death experience and into a brief life review, looking at the key lessons, decisions, and attitudes that were carried forward. She continues on there, and I'm going to jump ahead here again. She said, the most amazing part of my experience, however, was the fact that my legs quivered uncontrollably as I lay in front of the classroom. It wasn't painful, however. It was as if my legs were releasing some sort of energy that had been stored in them since that prior lifetime. And she said, I can't totally explain how this works. To my astonishment and that of my classmates, I was back on the tennis court the following day with no foot distress, and those toes have never bothered me again in the 20-plus years since then.
Odd. Weird.
Super weird. So,
okay.
Yeah, so the writer, Miss Barham, was saying, she was just your most kind of unassuming, skeptical, let's just say, grad student.
Yeah.
Never considered past life regression therapy before this experience, and then was just completely blown away by what happened.
Odd.
And that is the theme for most of this stuff.
What's interesting about that, and there's no way of knowing, but I feel like I'd be doing a disservice if I didn't bring it up, but it's like, how much of that could that just be her filling in blanks, creating a narrative? It's like, okay, here's some trauma from my childhood or just some discomfort from my life in general. My subconscious, now that I'm hypnotized, is going to create a narrative. And again, without knowing everything and who the hypnotist was and everything, maybe they asked leading questions, and maybe it was like, oh, and then what did you do? And she's like, oh, okay, think of something. And I ran away. I killed myself. I don't know.
Right.
That being said, it's really interesting. It's really fascinating, especially because she was, dancing around the following day without any pain.
Yeah. So that is how she approaches most of these subjects in the book, because it's almost like they have an issue. Sometimes it's physical pain, sometimes it's, emotional trauma, something like that, and it's about getting back into what was it that caused it, and then in some cases curing the issue.
Yeah. I'm just happy she wasn't Cleopatra or something.
Thank you for saying this.
It's like everyone that has a past life was either Cleopatra or Napoleon or a king. It's like, show me a peasant. Show me a caveman or something. Like, come on.
Dude, I will say, I categorically do not believe anyone that's like, oh, I was having dinner with Marie Antoinette.
Yeah, right.
Or I was Marie Antoinette. It's like, nah, no.
No, you really weren't.
I met Abraham Lincoln. It's like, no. So none of the stories that I pulled up today are going to have anything like that for that very reason.
Okay, good.
And I read the whole book, and I only saw one that suggested, and it's not even in today's episode, but suggested like they were meeting famous people.
Okay.
So I'm like, okay, good.
We'll move on. We'll find a different one.
Precisely, because I was like, I just do not believe that whatsoever, but that's okay. Okay, so let's move on to kind of the next story. And what I love about this one is it's just really interesting. They're all really interesting. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I think the theme here is being a person that's trying to make sense of a reoccurring dream, somebody who's trying to make sense of a phrase that they've heard, and they just don't know really where it came from, and they can't make sense of it. So let me jump over here to this next story, and I'll tee it up here in just a sec as I get this to the right page. All right, so in this story, just a little context here. A man by the name of Jonah had a troubling recurring dream, and he found himself waking up on a regular basis just shouting out loud the number 3501.
What?
3501.
It's just, you could stop right there. That's wild.
He's like, doctor, or I should really say in this case, therapist, I'm sorry, I don't know what this means.
Yeah.
And I keep having this dream, and let me explain the dream that I'm having.
Oh, my God.
So he said, in this dream, I am a soldier in Vietnam. I'm in a special operations unit. I'm alone. My unit members are dead or missing. The commander of the NVA, the North Vietnamese Army, we are fighting, calls out to me. He tells me to come out, that I'm outnumbered, and it's a matter of time before I'm found. I'm out of ammo and wounded. He tells me that if I come out, he will kill me quickly and allow me to die like a man. So this guy, he's in Vietnam. He's fighting. He's part of a special tactical unit.
Yeah.
He's been surrounded. He's basically, he's kind of the last one that's alive, right? So that's a scary place to be. He continues with the story. I come out, and he makes me look at him. He then shoots me in the groin. The pain is very severe. I feel a sharp pain on my forehead. He shot me again. I feel a slight thump behind my right ear. I am then on the ground. I can see several NVA soldiers around me, but I can't speak and I can't move. It's like I'm asleep, but I can see them. I feel no pain, just a weird, cloudy sensation. As I'm waking up from the dream, I yell, "What is my name? Who am I?" And a voice tells me my name and tells me I was killed in 1970 in Vietnam. It tells me to remember 3501. I argue with it. I tell it I was born in 1972, and it replies, "That's enough time." When I woke up, I couldn't remember what my name was, but I felt in the back of my head, behind my ear, I have a small indentation exactly where I was shot in my dream. I also have what feels like a small indentation ending in a groove down my forehead on the left side of my head, exactly where I was shot in my dream. So that's a bizarre, recurring dream to be having.
Yes.
And fast forward a little bit further into this story, where things pick back up again. And here, the therapist, Miss Barham, is directing him to go back into his dream, or back into his hypnosis session, because it's like that can be traumatic for a person, or perhaps they kind of wake up or need to come back into calm. And then during a different session, they continue, and she gets him back into that kind of same place. And what he said was, as I then direct him to return to the dream and lifetime during the Vietnam War, the session becomes a somewhat physical event. Jonah's legs began to kick out as he lies on the couch. As if he's trapped in something he wants to break out of, he comes into a scene where he's hiding in the bushes and trees. "I don't know where they are," he says, panic-stricken, and starts to cry with intense fear. It's early morning. He and his unit have been sent to assassinate someone, a captain. "But Charlie knew we were coming. We've been ambushed." He heard shouting and shots fired for a while, but it's quiet now. "I'm all alone. I think they're all dead." His chest and arms are cold. He's crouched down, hiding in the bushes with his helmet and his rifle. But he has no bullets. They were all used during the earlier fighting. And he identifies himself as Corporal Matthews from Albany, New York, a draftee. He was selected for the Special Forces because he was a good shot. He didn't particularly like the idea of the Special Forces because that was inherently more risky. And after some more therapy and some more sessions, we finally dig into what it is about that 3501. Continuing on with the session, I ask him, what about that 3501? What does that number signify? Finally, he responds, that's the last 4 digits of the serial number on my rifle, he says. We all have to memorize the serial number. If I have my 3501, then I'm okay.
What? What? Did they look him up?
You want to keep going with the story?
Yeah, I need some closure, man.
So actually what ended up happening was...
No. Okay, yeah, keep going.
So the gentleman whose pseudonym here is Jonah ended up going back and finding the name of this, and it just escaped me off the top of my head here, Corporal Matthews from New York.
Albany.
Yep. Actually found that name on the Vietnam Veteran Memorial Wall.
No.
Yeah. And what they said was that probably because of him being in the Special Forces and not having much more to go off of, that's, he couldn't dig back.
They couldn't verify the cause of, or the exact,
precisely, right? Like so many other Vietnam, deaths and those things, a lot of murky details there, but they verified the fact that there was a person from Albany, New York with that name and also that name on the wall. So
come on.
Yeah.
That is heavy.
That's a heavy one.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, how? What? It's not funny. What other explanation is there? That's crazy.
It is. And
all his life, he was yelling that number. Yeah.
This is what bothers me, too, is it's not like you're going to have an answer to any of this, Tim, right now.
I don't know. I haven't heard the whole episode yet, so...
maybe you'll just agree that this is a real thing, I guess. I don't know.
Could be.
But I mean, that is it, right? It's like, what else would explain it? Okay, perhaps, maybe some sort of false memory.
Yeah, maybe he heard the name once or saw the traveling memorial at one time, or I don't know.
Yeah.
But probably not.
That's what I think too. So, in essence, now this particular person used what they learned from past life, from those sessions, to then kind of build and grow and hopefully move on from that. But I thought that was just 100% bonkers.
That is too much.
Seriously. So in that last story, or that last anecdote, we heard about the soldier that still had, even in a different lifetime, some marks, right? He said he felt an indentation where he thought he was shot. He had kind of a little bit of an unexplained scar, or scarring in some situations. So that's peculiar. And another interesting story that I found was related to this very phenomenon, which is basically having an unexplained birthmark or situation.
Actually, I mean, not to cut you off. Maybe the story will explain it, but that's one of the more odd things about this phenomenon, is that generally speaking, when you're talking about reincarnation or a past life, it's soul, for the lack of a better term, right?
Yes.
The soul passes from one body to the next, etc. Why would the physical body, like in the first story with the toe, and then this one with the birthmarks and the indentation and all that stuff, why would parts of the physical body pass over? Hey, explain the afterlife to me, would you? I don't get it.
Okay, so that's a brilliant question, because that to me is real also. And in fact, I remember a friend of mine had studied abroad in Australia, and the Aboriginal have very specific beliefs around where your birthmark is located and how you died.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah, so just interesting stuff there too. And the story that she had heard based on her birthmark was that she may have been a turtle, I think, and then was stabbed. Yeah, it's crazy. So
wow.
Super interesting. But yeah, I think about that too, because I can understand memories or even false memories, but to explain a physical ailment or something else to me is totally unexplainable.
And honestly, I mean, I hate to be that guy, but it's almost like you take something something you live with every single day, like the woman's toe, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe the guy doesn't think about the indentation behind his ear every single day, but it's it's something he's aware of on his body, and then it's just kind of creating this narrative around it. it lends less credibility to these stories. Now, that being said, the fact that he knew the guy's name from the city and state, all that, that blows the whole thing out of the water. Like, don't get me wrong, but
Yes.
it is suspicious. You see where I'm getting at?
For sure.
So,
To take it a slightly different direction, though, too, one thing from that last story that I drew out that just freaked me out was when it's almost like he's having that conversation with like a higher power, and the line was, "It's has been enough time." Like, what?
I mean, come on. What does that mean?
For who? For what? Exactly. dude.
Your soul needs to pass through and cleanse and like do this thing beyond the veil, and then it's put back in onto earth.
Right.
Like,
and folks, I should say too, like, I'm going to be covering more of this kind of stuff in the future, so I think we might get into that. I've heard stories too, just from other shows that I listen to and whatever, that like the number is something like 41 or 42 years is required for a soul to go through
42.
the cleansing. Something.
That's
The
answer to everything.
Dang it, you're right.
Yeah.
My sister just turned 42, and that was. I almost made that joke. I'm like, she won't get it, but that's okay. But yeah, isn't that wild? I think it was either 41 or 42, low 40s, which is like.
I had no idea that was it, but this higher power said, "Nah, that's
two's
long
good enough." Yeah,
it's good enough.
Round.
Go get him, champ.
Exactly. Okay, well, so now jumping back into this story here. So this was crazy because I liked this one because this man was wanting to understand more about a birthmark on his chest.
Okay, cool.
And he decided to go through this session or this therapy with her because his wife was deciding to do it. And so he's like, okay, whatever, I'll just do it too.
Yeah.
Let's find out what the story is with this birthmark.
I'm here, might as well.
Pretty much is kind of what it sounded like. So,
Sure.
But I will say he had what he called a peculiar birthmark on his chest. He finds himself as a clean-cut young man in his mid to late 20s in a neatly pressed military uniform from another era. He's laughing with a comrade in arms with whom he's served in the military for a good while. They became close friends very quickly in the life and death situations they have faced fighting together. We quickly identify this man as Richard's father in his current life.
Oh.
So he's palling around with a soldier who now, in this lifetime, is his father.
Wow.
Yeah, interesting. In the next scene, the two men are traveling in a military boat along with other soldiers. He realizes his friend, although of similar age, has a higher rank than he does, and is the officer commanding the boat. As the commander, his friend has knowledge of what they will be facing up ahead, but he hasn't shared it with the rest of the men yet. Our soldier suspects nervously that they're headed to a battle somewhere, having set out from Italy on this boat. Sure enough, as they approach their destination, the officer reveals they are approaching a nasty, well-nigh impossible battle, and they must be prepared to fight to the death. The boat's approaching Croatia, so they were able to figure that out later, right?
Mm-hmm.
He said, "Hey, Dad, it's too quiet." Now that's what he says to his friend, who's the officer.
Yeah.
Ironically, it appears that the entire fighting unit has given the commanding officer the nickname of Dad because he looks out for them all, and they realize that on the higher ground in the brush, there's an ambush waiting for them. "Why go that way?" he argues with Dad. "It's not good." "That's the way we've been ordered to go," his friend answers with resignation. It's not the right way, he thinks. It's not the right way. And before he knows it, Dad's running up the beach and is shot. Instantly fatal. Dad's gone just like that. "It should have been me," he rails at himself. "I'm not as important." Why? He didn't have to lead the charge like that. He's always so passive usually. Why did he do that? They eventually see that the commander is dying, and much to their surprise, like this unit, the group of soldiers waiting to ambush them all come out. And this is where it gets a little bit weird, okay? Suddenly and very unexpectedly, the opposing forces come out of the bushes and make overtures of peace. "Let's go have a glass of wine," they offer. It makes no sense at all to the men who have just seen their beloved commanding officer cut down. But they all go into a little village and have a drink together, and it appears that Dad's death had calmed everyone down. Everyone looked up to him, including the Croatians. He was a prominent, well-loved figure, and his death shocked some sense into them all. Our soldier negotiates a deal that settles the conflict, arranges a hero's burial for Dad, and then goes on to become a governor of this war-torn area. So, in short, this soldier that witnessed, one of his commanding officers dies, stays there, there's peace, and he becomes like a local politician, if you want to call it that. So he's not saying he's the king, but he's like, within the municipality, just kind of like a higher ranking, bureaucrat, if you will. Okay, so she says, I suggest he jump forward to about the age of 30. He's in power. He feels he's done a good job as governor. Everyone's content. But you can still see the effects of the war on the outskirts of town, and it's a constant reminder of what we don't want. I'll leave it that way to remind us of the lessons of history, he explains. I instruct the governor to jump ahead to age 40. He sees a picture of himself hanging on the wall in a warm room with tapestries. He's put on weight and sports a handlebar mustache that curls up at the ends, but it's just his portrait. I'm not there. I'm not alive anymore, he says. They killed me. The nationalists killed me. He's surprised. Although most people are happy with his rule, it turns out that a man who served as his trusted assistant for many years unexpectedly assassinates him. I'm sitting in my power chair, and he takes a sword and runs it through the back of the chair, all the way through my back. So,
thus explaining the birthmark, I suppose.
Yeah, if it goes through the back and then ultimately through the front, right? So perhaps, maybe, that birthmark can be explained by being stabbed through the back.
I guess. Is there a birthmark on his back as well?
Didn't say. Makes you wonder, though, doesn't it?
That is interesting. That is the whole story is just fascinating.
Well, and that's just it, too, which is, the therapist was saying, it's always interesting to go into a session with somebody who has no idea what to expect, who's totally uncolored, who's totally untainted by any sort of preconceived notion. And then it's just like, oh, where did that even come from?
Yeah, it's like, I don't know anything about Croatia. Italy, what?
Precisely. Exactly right. And this is a thing, too, kind of like similar to the birthmark, similar to the first story we heard about the writer, having some sort of ailments, having things that they can attribute to a past life experience. And like, what's kind of crazy about this, or what is actually crazy about this, some of this stuff, too, is like, there are very specific common, shall we say, ailments that people experience that I think can be maybe in some situations attributed to a past life. Oh. Which is weird.
Yeah.
So, for instance, this was crazy. These are really short kind of anecdotes here.
Yeah.
Here's one, allergies and asthma. One client had been plagued with allergies and asthma since adolescence. She was rarely able to breathe through her nose. In Regression, she visited a lifetime as a man who was moved to help his neighbors who fell sick. And in doing so, he wore himself ragged and became sick. Unfortunately, the local priests accused him of being heretical, or being, a heretic using heretical healing practices. He was thrown in the dungeon, which made his conditions worse. He found it extremely difficult to breathe and eventually died in the dungeon.
Oof.
So.
Okay. What a. Ugh. That's awful.
That is awful. Another one, too, insomnia, ADHD. She said a 21-year-old student came to me to see her about her insomnia, claiming that the 4 hours of sleep at night was not enough for her. She had recurring nightmares that she was about to die, and traced this back to a young age. We uncovered a lifetime in France in the late 1300s when, as the daughter of a prominent political figure, she was expected to stay indoors to protect her complexion and follow only approved ladylike pursuits. She was eventually married off to an older man who had similar requirements of her. In fact, he placed a guard on her during her frequent absences, or his frequent absences, to make sure she didn't disobey his commands. This guard eventually became physically abusive, claiming she needed to learn her place. And so eventually the story goes on to say that, she was more or less kept a prisoner. Yeah.
Traumatic.
Bird in a cage, forced to kind of stay up because she was afraid of the person watching over her, paranoid because of, her husband, and those things perhaps could be contributing to her insomnia.
Oof.
This other one too, dude, just was like, okay. Restless Leg Syndrome.
Yeah, that's a weird... Yeah.
I think I might actually have that. Like, I'm not joking. Like, I cannot sit still. My legs are always they feel like they need to be moving around. So, a somewhat similar issue arose for a woman who wished to investigate the origins of her restless legs. She described her feelings as, I can't be tied down, confined, or sit still. She found a prior life in the early 1900s when, as an older woman, her younger husband wished to be rid of her so he could pursue another love interest. He arranged for her to be hospitalized in a mental ward where she became tied down to the bed so she could hardly move. This went on for some time before she was released. And the client reported that even in her current life, a sense of freedom and self-determination was key.
Wow. Interesting.
I don't like that one because, just for a lot of reasons, but I just feel like, ugh. Another one, too, that kind of popped to me, that was a real short anecdote. Here is about foot, ankle, and back pain. She said, a client in her early 50s had chronic problems with pain in her feet, her back, and one of her ankles. Doctors really couldn't point to a specific cause. In her regression, she went to a lifetime as a young teenager. Went out exploring the woods on his own. So, by the way, this woman now in her past life was a man, right? So this teenager went out in the woods. He began to investigate a crevice in a large rock. In the darkness inside, he fell and got trapped by his foot and hips. He had wrenched his ankle and was stuck in a very uncomfortable position and stressed his back. No one knew where he'd gone. He was unable to extricate himself. He died full of fear and feelings of guilt that he would not be around his mother to help, as well as with his younger sister. So, it's kind of like this general pain. Doctors can't figure out where it's coming from.
Past lives.
It be?
Past lives.
I think so.
That's weird. That's some weird stuff.
I know.
I don't know. Some of them where they point out specific things, like names and addresses and social security numbers or whatever. That's insane. Some of these other ones, I'm just a little more skeptical of.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's okay. And in fact, this whole book, I've only pulled out just a couple of stories because some of them were kind of like, all right, maybe not. But still interesting. And like you said earlier, some of the specific details are chilling. But I found a common theme throughout all of these, and I want to leave people with a little bit of hope, perhaps.
Oh, good.
We start kind of getting into the sunset of this particular episode, maybe.
I like that. That's good. That's
thank
good.
you. But it's this theme of not being afraid of death.
Mm-hmm.
That has, this is something that pops not only in past life stories. You hear this sometimes, voices from beyond the grave, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And I just found that interesting. That seemed to actually come up a couple of times. So I just pull out here a couple of interesting stories or just aspects of, some themes there. Now, I'll say the backstory to this person doesn't matter, and I'll just kind of jump right into where I think things get actually really interesting. So this person says, I'm in Egypt. It's really beautiful here. So I prompt her to describe her role, and she says that she's an important woman. She says, I'm a wife. I lead women with women's knowledge. The men don't want to know, but my husband knows. I know I'm important. It feels good to be here. My husband loves me. So, she's feeling good about her situation. And it goes on to give some more details about kind of where she's at and where she's at in her life. But what becomes clear is that she's actually moving into much older age, advanced life, and getting closer to death. And she says, we move forward looking for a significant event, and her husband has died. She says, but I'm not sad. I know he's still here. I know I'm going to die myself. And we move towards her death. All her children and her grandchildren are there. They're amazed when they watch me die. I just glow. I just glow light. I'm showing them what I taught them's real. Some of them doubt. They don't know. But what I show them is real. Hear my last lesson to them. What I said is true. We don't die. We turn into beings of light. I just get brighter and brighter until I'm gone. And there's no body left.
Wow.
Isn't that weird?
Wow.
Yeah. And just to continue on this, just one more anecdote here. Hang with me for a sec here. Another story. It's so crazy, man. He says, this is a person by the name of Yanis. Again, the details of his life don't matter, but again, just talking about the death here, what he says is, we go to Yanis's last day of life. He's outside feeling the sun. The sounds are fading. I keep asking to go home. I'm ready to die. I know everyone will be okay, he says reassuringly. There's something special, somewhere I belong. His death is peaceful and quiet. it's beautiful here. There are so many beings with me. They're wrapping me in light. They go on to talk about his lifetime. And some of the key lessons that were brought on by this session were caring for others was key. Feeling that concern and acting upon it. Another realization was to understand that many things, including other people, were out of his control. And finally, a key lesson was to never fear death. So this thought of being wrapped in light, this thought of, dissolving into energy.
Yeah.
These are themes. These are things that people across cultures, time, race, creed, you name it.
You name it. Literally across cultures and time.
Yeah.
That's a common theme. That is so fascinating.
It is.
It is. I wish I had something poignant to add on. I really don't.
No, I know. And that's what's tough, too. And I will say, the criticism of past life regression therapy, of course, is the idea of, a person can create false memories. Mm-hmm. There was a rash of false memories and trials and lawsuits in the 90s related to people that had undergone some past life regression therapy that were just basically making up, whole cloth, these stories. Yep. And that's because it's not that hard. It's really about, you can be prompted and you can come up with more facts or ideas than really what are there. And so that was, that's contentious, obviously. And I don't know, man. The problem is there's just too many things that are all the same across all these stories. And I'm just like, well, maybe there's some truth to it.
Right. It would be interesting because... not to find criticism in this, because I find it incredibly fascinating, and I find her work to be really interesting and probably very beneficial for the people that see her.
Yeah.
But what I would love to see is this done in a different culture, like a non-Eurocentric, English-speaking. Show me something from sub-Saharan Africa. Show me something from Southeast Asia. Show me something from the Middle East, because maybe it's the same. Maybe it's the same. Right. Maybe it's not. And those people are telling more culturally, not appropriate, but culturally relevant stories, I guess.
Sure.
But I don't know. It is just, without sounding too full of myself, ourselves, like this is like the question, it doesn't get bigger than this.
You're
like
right.
this is kind of it. It's so odd. That being said, would you do it?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah?
Absolutely. In a heartbeat. Listeners, if you...
I'm just saying, man, maybe we do a Patreon exclusive hypnotherapy session.
Oh man, I would listen to that before I released it. Actually.
I would too, and we could leave out some HIPAA information, but it would be wild to see what stories, what memories that you came back with.
I hosted a podcast in the 1940s.
Yeah, right. It's like a podcast, but it's live. It comes over a speaker. Oh my gosh, man! Well, this was cool. This was wild. What's the book again?
The name of the book
author?
is The Past Life Perspective, Discovering Your True Nature Across Multiple Lifetimes by Anne C. Barham.
Wow. Thank you, Anne. That was wild. And whoever you are, Zach, I guess. Right? Napoleon? Joan of Arc?
Marie Antoinette. I love that.
All right, guys. Hey, thank you. Thank you for sticking all the way to the end. Thank you for listening. If you haven't already and you can, we would be incredibly grateful to you if you could rate and review and hit that subscribe button so you get our next one next week. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your local hypnotherapist about our podcast, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.